Pesha Delay. Welcome to the Awam Tibetan Buddhist Institute and our Sunday meditation hour and Dharma talk today. So we begin with the conch to invite all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to join us this morning. Blessing mantra. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimana Sara Maha Zambaba Hum Pech Soha. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimana Sara Maha Zambaba Hum Pech Soha. Om Sambara Sambara Bhimana Sara Maha Zambaba Hum Pech Soha. Homage to Samattabhadra and Samattabhadri, because I suffer due to my own precious human life without knowing when I will die. I will now engage in virtuous actions for the benefit of all sentient beings with joy and devotion. Therefore, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, in order to enable all sentient beings to attain enlightenment. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Vajrasattva and Vajratopa appear above me, purifying me and all beings and phenomena with nectar from the place of their union. Om Benza Sato Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sato Tenopa Tishtadrido Me Bawa Sutokayo Me Bawa Supokayo Me Bawa Anurakto Me Bawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutta Me Chitam Shriya Kuru Hom Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Benza Mame Mutsam Benzi Bawa Maha Samayas Sato Om Benza Sato Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sato Tenopa Tishtadrido Me Bawa Sutokayo Me Bawa Supokayo Me Bawa Anurakta Me Bawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutta Me Chitam Shriya Kuru Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Benze Mame Munta Benze Bawa Maha Samaya Sato Om Benza Sato Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sato Tenopa Tishtadrido Me Bawa Sutokayo Me Bawa Supokayo Me Bawa Anurakto Me Bawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayata Sarva Karma Sutta Me Chitam Shriya Kuru Hom Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sarva Tata Gata Benza Mame Muntam Benzi Bawa Maha Samaya Sato Mandala offering. Om Ahom. In the Dharmakaya pure realm, Dharmadhatu equality, the realms of the five Sambhogakaya families self-appear unobstructedly, along with the array of Namanakaya pure realms that fill all of space. All this I offer at Samattabhadra's clouds of great bliss. Om Ratna Mandala Puja Mega Samudra Saparana Samaya Ahom. The short 7-minute prayer. Whatever merit I have gathered through prostrations, offerings, confession, rejoicing, requesting, and praying for the sake of the enlightenment of all sentient beings, all this I dedicate. Home, in the northwest of the land of Oregon, in the heart of a lotus flower, endowed with the most marvelous attainments, you are renowned as a lotus born, surrounded by many hosted dakinis. Following in your footsteps, I pray to you, come and bless me with your grace. Guru Pema Siddhi Home. Home, in the northwest of the land of Oriana, where a lotus flower, endowed with the most marvelous attainments, renowned as the lotus born, surrounded by many hosted dakinis. Following in your footsteps, I pray to you, come and bless me with your grace. Guru Pema Siddhi Home. Home, in the northwest of the land of Oregon, in the heart of a lotus flower, endowed with the most marvelous attainments, you are renowned as a lotus born, surrounded by many hosted dakinis. Following in your footsteps, I pray to you, come and bless me with your grace. Guru Pema Siddhi Home. And the mantra, Om Ahum Benza Guru Pema Siddhi Home. 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 Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Om Ahum is a girl up in the city home. Continue with the text. Light radiates from the Guru's four places into my four places, purifying my body, speech, mind, and all subtle obscurations, granting the four empowerments and planting the four seeds. The Guru dissolves into light and merges inseparably into myself. To dissolve visualization, just rest in the natural state of pure awareness, and we'll meditate for about 5 minutes. So the past few weeks we've been looking at ethics in Tibetan Buddhism and some of the different issues that come up as a part of that. And last week I said, well, we would look at Tantra and Dzogchen ethics this week. But as I spent the week preparing for that, I decided it was just too much information to do in one Dharma talk. So I'm just going to focus on the Tantra ethics today, and then we'll look at Dzogchen ethics next week. So you may know that Tantra developed in India around the 4th to 6th centuries CE, Common Era. And no one really knows much about how it originated, exactly where it originated, those kind of things. Scholars are trying to figure all of that out, but they come up with different opinions about all of that. So there's lots of different theories out there about that. The classical Vedic period that we are at least somewhat familiar with, which is now thought to have started around 1500 BCE, and then it ran up to what they call the classic Vedic period, ended about the time of the Buddha, around the 5th century BCE. So it was in a period of decline at the time of the Buddha as part of that. But then, not right at that time, but some of that sustained itself, and eventually became what we call today Hinduism. So one of the ways that you can think about that, it's a little bit like the Christian tradition, which came out of the Hebrew tradition, in a general kind of way, not real specifically, of course. And so that began to emerge around the beginning of the new millennium and really took hold around the 3rd century or so. So the culture of India was changing. There was an increased role of women in society. Also, we began to see the evolving influence of the feminine in the culture, the religious traditions, and the art, and so forth. So what we saw originally were things that had no female figures in them at all, then itty-bitty, teeny-tiny ones over in the corners and so forth. But then they begin to get bigger and bigger, and eventually they become dominant in some of those cases. So there's also at this time an increase in trade going on between India and the Middle East and China and so forth. So we're beginning to see a lot more of that. And as a part of that, we're beginning to get a development of the middle class, which didn't previously exist. And so there's this increasing representation of deities, including female forms. There's also the beginning of a view that sex could be used as a spiritual manner, which may have emerged from practices in China and Taoism, familiar with that, or not. We just don't exactly know. Tantra is often referred to as the path of transformation, and it's compared with alchemy, is sometimes used as an analogy for that, turning lead into gold, and so it's a transformation process. So afflictive emotions were viewed as being pure or transformed into pure kind of experiences on the path to liberation. So Tantra became included in Hinduism, as well as Shaivism and Buddhism. All three of those branches, and probably some other smaller religious traditions, also absorbed that into their practices. It was particularly associated with the yoga traditions that are part of those branches. All of them have yogic traditions as a part of that. But they began to even influence the monastic traditions. And so we began to see texts, for example, that emerged. The earliest one that I have heard reference to was about 425 CE, Common Era. So that doesn't mean that's the earliest one. It's the earliest one anyone has found, so there could be some that were earlier than that. And undoubtedly these practices were going on for some time before it ever got written down as well. That would be the usual way these things happen. So for Buddhism, the principal shift is one of views and the inclusion of gods and deities as a part of this, both male and female, in the way that they deal with this. And so that's incorporated into the idea of the ethics, as we will see, as a part of this. But this is a non-theistic religion. Most religions have gods, or one particular god that is the supreme being, is one of the phrases used. But in Buddhism, they recognize these gods as beings, but they are not Buddhas. Okay, so Buddha forms are different. But somewhere along the line in the process of translation, they became, the Tantra paintings we have around here and so forth, became recognized and referred to as deities, which is a little bit confusing because the word deities is a word that means a synonym for gods, but they're gods. Now, Buddhism does recognize gods from other religions and spirits and so forth from ancient traditions, but they're not Buddhas, okay? So they make a difference between them. So when we talk about a deity in Buddhism, we're talking about a Buddha form. And when we talk about a god, that's a different class of beings altogether. They have their own realms, multiple ones, that they occupy and so forth. Buddhist ethics evolved accordingly. And so although the basic principles remain the same, do good, at least do no harm for the benefit of all beings, so that's the underlying practice in terms of all of Buddhism. The shift is in the view, and what is referred to as pure view. And so all beings are viewed as Buddhas, all sounds as mantras, all thoughts as the wisdom of a Buddha, and all phenomena as a Buddha field or a pure land, an abode of a Buddha, those kind of things. Thus, our actions are adapted to this new view of reality, albeit still based upon the previous forms. So the previous forms were very influential, and they carry forward and they still apply all the way through. But there are these new ideas that are becoming incorporated as a part of this. So this changes and elevates some of the view that we have about beings from looking at all other beings, like all mother sentient beings that we've referred to in text from previous lives, to Buddhas here and now. So they're no longer just all mother sentient beings, they're all Buddhas. Okay? So admittedly, this is not something for everyone, but it is a form of Buddhism that was transmitted into Tibet in the 8th century in the first dissemination, and then later in the 11th and 12th centuries in the second dissemination, during a period of when Buddhism was in decline in India, and there was an increase in the Hindu tradition that I already mentioned, and there were various Muslim invasions. There's several waves of Muslim invasions into India, which resulted in the Islam becoming another variant of religious tradition in India at that time. And so there were various people converted from Indian traditions over the Hindu tradition specifically, and Buddhism into the Muslim tradition and Hinduism. They became much more dominant. And so then we see this movement of Buddhism up into Tibet at that time. So that's at least one of the factors that was involved in that. So pure view also elevates the role of ethics. And so in our meditation and in our daily lives, in attempting to apply these, we have to keep in mind the 4 reliances that I have mentioned before: the teaching over the teacher, the meaning over the words, the definitive meaning over the provisional meaning, the transcendent over ordinary knowledge. All of those factors are very important as we look at these things. So among the most common vows or commitments in this are the 14 root downfalls, which are also taken by lay practitioners. Sometimes take vows as nakpas or nakmas, PA for male and MA for females. So these are ordained lay practitioners. They often did various kinds of rituals for people in the communities and so forth, in addition to their own Buddhist practices. And then another one is the 25 Branch Samayas. So we're going to look at both of those, as well as some vows associated with the process of empowerments for doing certain kinds of practices. There's lots of other ones, but we don't have time for all of those. So in addition, we have to continue, as I mentioned, the 18 root downfalls or bodhisattva downfalls. Okay, those still apply from the path of altruism, and the 10 unwholesome actions, going back to the path of the individual liberation. So all of those still apply. If it seems like a bit too much, which it certainly can be, all of these lists of different kinds of ethical behaviors, although they do overlap quite a bit, just keep in mind the basic principles. Do good, or at least do no harm, for the benefit of all beings. And then we might add here, in this context, the idea that all beings have this innate goodness. Okay? Being Buddhas, we have that innate goodness. So with that background, let's look into the primary ethical developments here. The first one is that list of the 14 root downfalls. So these apply pretty much across the board in terms of the Tantra or Vajrayana practices. There are different versions of these, and so what I've tried to do is collect the ones that appear to be the most common, and in a few cases there are alternatives, so I may throw one or two of those in as well. So most of these are fairly self-explanatory. They don't require much detail about them. But if you're really not sure, you want to know more about them, my recommendation is ask your Lama about those, because we do need to understand what it is that they are referring to. So a word of caution here. We're beginning to get into a very deep level of understanding Buddhism and the terminology and so forth that is involved in this. And so it's something that may be confusing or just unknown to you. You may not be familiar with terminology and so forth, particularly with beginners. But at this point, it's not so important that you grasp every single point as it is that you have a general idea of the kinds of ethics that are involved at this part of the level of these different vows. So here we go. Number 1 of the 14 root downfalls: disrespecting your Vajra master, the Lama or the Guru. So this means to upset, abuse, or to be contemptuous of him or her physically, verbally, or mentally, body, speech, or mind, including harboring wrong views about him or her. So basically, we need to respect the Lama, the Guru, the teacher, even if we have doubts or other views than what are being taught to us. The second one is transgressing teachings of the Buddha. So this means to disrespect and reject the teachings, even when due to lack of understanding them. So that can be a little difficult, because if we don't understand them, then it's easy to violate this one, not intentionally. But what we need to do is study and practice, and the more we study and practice, the better we understand. Ask the Lama if you don't understand, and so forth. And then it's less likely that that will happen. Most practicing Buddhists don't really have a problem with this one. Number 3, to be angry at your Vajra brothers or sisters, the Sangha. Okay, so we have to be careful about that. That means out of anger, to speak of any fault of a spiritual brother or sister, or to strike or otherwise inflict a sort of injury, physically, verbally, or mentally. So again, it's just a matter of respecting all the Vajra brothers and sisters. That's our Sangha. There's different levels of Sangha I've talked about before. But basically, other Buddhists, all levels, those are the people we're talking about here. The number 4 is to abandon love for all sentient beings. One of the core teachings of the Buddha is loving kindness for all sentient beings. So this means to resolve never to help a particular being and thereby give up the intention to lead him or her to awakening. So the idea here is the resolve never to help a being. Okay, And so we want to go beyond that. We don't want that kind of a resolve. We want to help all beings and to help them. This is basically the same as the Buddha's Alpha vow. Okay? We're vowing to help other beings until all beings achieve awakening. Number 5 is abandoning bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment or awakening, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So this means to emit seminal essence in union with a consort. Usually this is something that is just visualized, not actually practiced, but it can be done with an actual karma mudra. This is done to achieve awakening, but in the case of the loss of seminal fluid, it's done out of ordinary desire or pleasure, or in disregard of tantric vows. So that's the primary thing, is if that is done, so this primarily addresses males as a part of this, that if you're doing it out of desire or for pleasure, then you're not doing it in the context of Tantra. Number 6, disparaging our own or others' beliefs. So this means specifically to disparage such beliefs out of a desire for personal gain. What does that mean? Well, this is to the merit that we would get from inspiring others to follow the Buddhist tradition. So if we're disparaging other kind of beliefs in order to try and get them to follow Buddhist beliefs because we think we're going to get merit from doing that, that violates the rule. Okay? We don't disparage other beliefs. Number 7, revealing secrets of the Tantra to those not ready to understand. So there are secrets involved in this, and the primary purpose of the secrets is because if people don't understand, they can begin to disparage or disbelieve, and that's going to make it more difficult to try and do something that would help encourage them to also become awakened or enlightened. And that's not our goal. We want them to be able to do that. So we want them to understand, but in some cases it's better not to say anything about some of these things until they're in a better position. So the meaning here is someone not prepared for initiation to tantric practices who would become apprehensive and or disdainful of such secrets. It's not always possible to know that that's going to happen when you talk about this with somebody else. So number 8, abusing your own embodied being as impure, yourself. Now I remember talk about the Buddha and his practices as a form of extreme asceticism. That's what we're talking about here. So the meaning is to despise one's own body as the principal source of suffering, and engaging in extreme asceticism such as self-mortification with weapons, burning it with fire, extreme fasting, or other austerities. So we want to avoid those. Avoid the extremes, the Buddha said, and follow the middle way. Number 9, indulging doubts about the pure nature of emptiness. So this means to misconceive the relative truth of interdependent arising of all phenomena as mere appearance without any intrinsic reality. That they appear, but they have no nature of reality with them. Like a reflection of a moon in water is one of the examples that is given. So basically what we're talking about here is the illusory nature of phenomena in the ordinary world, that everything is different than the way we actually experience it. We experience things as being real, but what we're really experiencing are things in our mind. Okay? And even from a scientific point of view, if we look at and examine those things, how many of us can see atoms? No? Okay, and we can look at a lot of other things associated with the way we experience things. We're very, very limited in the way that we perceive things, whether it's through our eyes, our ears, our nose. All of those things are extremely limited, extremely narrow, and yet we tend to talk about empirical reality as if that's all there is. That's not all there is. And in Buddhism, the focus is on this is just an experience. Okay? There's more to it than that. Now,
what's more to it than that is a little bit different than the scientific view of things, but it does have some similarities. And so that analogy can be helpful there. And then the next one, number 10, is to have love for the wicked. It means to show affection for evil beings such as demons, religious extremists, or arrogant challengers of the teachings who are untamable. When I read this, I always think of the Bodhisattva vow. Now, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to love all beings? Don't we want all beings to attain that? But this is looking at it to be a little bit more cautious on a relative level. This is not one that's oriented more towards that ultimate kind of level. So we have to be prepared in terms of dealing with people that can be difficult. Again, we don't want to get in a fight with them. We don't want to cause them to disregard Buddhism even more than they may already, those kind of things. So we have to be careful. Number 11, claiming to be realized when we are not. This means to reify or depreciate that which is beyond designation. Think of existence, non-existence, both or neither, Nagarjuna's tetralemma, or emptiness itself. Emptiness can be very confusing to people, partly because it's based on a translation of an Indian word, shunyata, which has a negative kind of way of saying something. The Indian tradition, in terms of its language, has a tendency to do that. Instead of saying what things are, they tend to say what things are not. Nagarjuna tried to change that around, as did a number of other masters over time, to find a more a better way of saying that, a more positive way of saying that. And the way that Nagarjuna came up with basically is everything's interdependent. Because the negative way of looking at emptiness is the lack of. That's why it's translated as emptiness. So the lack of an inherent self-existence, independent of its own, without regard to anything else. Well, when we examine things, we realize that's not the case. Everything is interdependent with at least one or more other things. Okay? And so that's the reality, if you will, not that they have some independent existence. So that's number 11. Number 12, deriding the practices of others. So here, this means that in general, to destroy a practitioner's faith, in particular, through disrespect and out of jealousy, attempt to destroy the faith of a person of purity who inwardly dwells in pristine awareness of reality, but whose outward conduct is a bit unorthodox. Okay? And we see this in some places. So here we're talking about it's something beyond what we normally would expect. We expect people who follow a religious tradition, any religious tradition, to behave in a certain way, follow certain guidelines, ethical precepts about behavior and so forth. But in this particular part of the tradition, in Tantra, it is said, you've probably heard the phrase crazy wisdom. People doing things that seem a bit crazy, but inside they understand and have a perfect understanding and experience of Tantra as it's supposed to be. But how do we know from the outside? That's the challenge. Again, we have to be very careful in terms of evaluating or making judgments about people and their behaviors in that case. Then number 13, failing to accept the pledge substances. Excuse me. So this relates to empowerment. So when we get an empowerment, we're sometimes given certain substances. We may be given little ditzy pills, or we may be given a sip of alcohol, wine, or something like that we drink as a part of that. And so here it says to have doubts about and refuse the pledged substances, considering these substances to be impure. Now, they're based on an idea within Tantra referred to as the 5 meats and 5 nectars. And so the 5 meats are the meat of beef, dog, elephant, horse, and human. which are specifically prohibited as substances to take in the Vinaya, the monastic code for ethics. And the 5 nectars are feces, urine, blood, semen, and marrow or brain. Now, why would we say that those are okay? Well, what are they? They're things that normally we wouldn't do, either by rule, such as the meats in the monastic code, or other kinds of substances. You really want to eat that kind of thing? But Tantra, remember, we're kind of flipping everything around on its head. And so what we're saying is that everything is pure. Even these substances that we think of as being very impure or inappropriate. Okay? And so having doubts about that. So usually, though, in terms of the actual practice, what we're presented with is not a pile of poop. We're giving these little dootsie pills. We're giving a little alcohol or something like that as a part of that. Sometimes they use tea instead. As a part of a ritual feast or a celebration of some kind, or these empowerments as a part of that. Now, there are some centers that also offer alternatives to alcohol, so that is helpful if somebody's alcoholic, you don't want to take those kind of things. And the dootsie pills, people always wonder, okay, what's really in those dootsie pills? Well, they're made out of medicinal herbs, basically, okay? So there's nothing in those that are necessarily evil in that list of substances. Although I suppose one never knows for sure as a part of that. Finally, number 14 is abusing or deriding a woman. We saw this in the 14 downfalls, the root downfalls of Bodhisattva as well. The nature of wisdom. So this means to speak disparagingly to a woman or out of disrespect. So most of these 14 are things that are pretty easy, even common in everyday kinds of behavior. And generally common sense is sufficient to follow those guidelines without any particular problems. But it's still good to review these kind of things periodically just to recall and remember what is being asked of us. So those are the 14 root downfalls in Tantra. So the next group I want to talk just a little bit about are the 4 empowerment vows. So when we take empowerments, especially highest yoga tantra empowerments, there are 4 basic empowerments. Now, there may be quite a few more than just those 4, but those are the 4 basic ones that are kind of across the board, if you will, in all of these. So there's the vase empowerment, the secret empowerment, the wisdom empowerment, and the word empowerment. So one of the unique features of these tantric vows is that they are between you and the Lama. It's a very important relationship, more so than in any of the other Buddhist traditions. The importance of the relationship between you and your teacher, your Lama, compared with the other ethical commitments, which are generally between you and all other sentient beings. Okay? Don't kill all other sentient beings. Here, it's more specific. Don't kill your Lama. Don't kill other people that are real special in terms of the relationships of Tantra. So in highest Yoga Tantra, there are these 4 traditional vows that are embedded in the empowerments. And we don't always know that because oftentimes the empowerments are given strictly in Tibetan. And a lot of times they're not explained. Sometimes they are. Some lamas, a lot more lamas that can speak good English these days, and so sometimes they will explain, but even them, sometimes they don't. Or some who just teach in Tibetan have translators that they also will have translations of some of this so that we understand what it is that they're actually saying to us, which is extremely helpful. And so very broadly here, there are 3 requirements for authorization to do these kinds of practices, the Tantra. The first one is called Abhisheka, that means empowerment. the actual process of the empowerment, which is the ritual kind of washing the stains away from the body, speech, and mind. So it's like a purification process. And then the combination of those three, as well as establishing an extraordinary capacity into the disciple's very being, as described by Vipan Rinpoche. And then the second one is called the loom, or reading transmission of the text. Now, I've had a lot of empowerments where that was never done, or it was done without ever saying that that was done. But that's an important part of it, is getting the actual transmission of the text. Khenchen Lama gives lots of transmissions online, but he won't do empowerments online. But that's like a blessing that we received. And a lot of people will go to empowerments just to receive the blessing, not in order to actually do the practices. And the third part is called tree, which is an explanation of the text and how to actually do the practice. And again, a lot of times that is actually not done when giving the empowerments, but those are the three parts that are in the tradition supposed to be done as a part of this, so that you're able to do these practices. So the 4 vows, again, they're often not explained, at least in English. The vase empowerment purifies your body with the water taken from a vase, and you put it in your hand, you swallow that, maybe wipe the part, any remainder over the crown of your head. The vow associated with that is to cultivate the appearance of the deity, emptiness nature, and the union of appearance and emptiness. So basically what we're doing is we're being empowered to do the generation stage practices. Visualize the deity and the emptiness nature of that deity when we do the dissolution into emptiness and do the meditation. And then the union of appearance and emptiness happens when we come back out of the meditation. The second one is the secret empowerment, which purifies your speech for mantra recitation. And so they may give you a mala and you go a few beads with that. And so the vow here is to control the breath and the inner channels, the central channel in particular, resting in self-existing pristine awareness. So this empowers generally sometimes it empowers, these vary on what's being empowered. Sometimes it's just reciting the mantra. But in the Nyingma tradition, usually it is for the completion stage practices, like the 6 yogas of Naropa or something very similar to that. So that involves the inner channels, winds and drops and so forth. The third one is the wisdom empowerment, which purifies your mind. So we purify body, speech, and mind through these first 3 empowerments. They help prepare for realization of the ultimate truth nature of beings and phenomena. So the vow here is to practice and remain in innate, pristine awareness of bliss. So this relates to a consort, whether it's real or imagined. And usually it's just imagined when we do these practices. The fourth one is the 4th or word empowerment, which purifies the remaining subtle obscurations. We get rid of the main obscurations of body, speech, and mind, but sometimes there's some things that just kind of stick around a little bit. It's like when you wash the dishes, if you only do 1 round of washing the dishes, sometimes they come out and they're not completely clean. So we have to get rid of those remaining subtle obscurations. So the vow here is to rest in the utterly pure reality of bliss emptiness. Okay? So specific details do vary a little bit because there's a number of additional characteristics, various elements and vows that go beyond this, specific to each empowerment. So any particular practice for which you receive an empowerment, there are some other requirements associated with those. So these are usually given by the Lama during the empowerment. For example, they may include a number of mantra recitations that you are expected to do in order to complete your commitment. So empowerments are often taken, as I mentioned before, just as a blessing without making such commitments. But unfortunately, we don't always know exactly what commitments that we are committing ourselves to, although, as I said, it seems like lamas are getting better at sharing those kind of things with people. And sometimes Khenchen Lama usually will give a number of specific mantras to recite as a part of this, or a number of times to do the practice, those kind of things. Garchen Rinpoche usually doesn't. He usually just says bodhicitta. It's all about bodhicitta. So that's the Samaya vow that you're taking, is to follow that. The next group are the 25 Branch Samayas, which get a little bit complicated here, and it consists of 5 groups of 5 each, with a few variations in there. So the 25 Branch Samayas illustrate both the use of various afflictive emotions and impure substances that are transformed as a part of this practice into wisdom or pure substances with the ethical perspective of pure view. Okay? So everything is pure as it is. So this also includes the secret element of Tantra. So it begins explaining what some of these things are that are being kept secret. So this led to various restrictions on sharing texts and practices. So you may have tried to buy a book, for example, that was said was a restricted text, and so you had to explain when you received the empowerment, from what Lama, and those kind of things as a part of it. And so the 7th root downfall that we talked about before is revealing the secrets of Tantra to those not ready to understand. So that's where this comes in. So within that context, and for the benefit of others, the 5 sets of 5 Samayas are: the first group of 5 to recognize are the to realize all 5-fold conceptions. This is the Samaya of the view, how basic concepts can be redefined to represent the spiritual point of view or pure view. So we're going to go through a variety of things here. So the 5 aggregates are one of the groups of 5. Form, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. So what are they transformed into? They are all pure in their essence. Fairly simple. The second group of 5 are the 5 elements. The 5 elements are earth, water, fire, air, and space, as a mandala. The 5 kayas: Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, Dharmakaya, Abhisambodhikaya, and Vajrakaya. We usually only talk about the first 3 of those, and sometimes we talk about a 4th one. In this one, that 4th one is divided into 2 parts, and so we wind up with 5. And so the Nirmanakaya refers to the form body, physical manifestation. Sambhogakaya is kind of a celestial body, the deity forms. Dharmakaya is the truth body, or the mind of enlightenment, beyond form. Abhisambodhikaya is the causal force of the previous kayas, so it's what enables those things to manifest. And then Vajrakaya is the unchanging natural state, the indestructible transcendent body. Now, those last 2, the Abhisambodhikaya and the Vajrakaya, sometimes get reversed in different lists, so you may find them in a different order there. But those are the 5, nevertheless. And then there are the 5 wisdoms associated with the 5 Buddhas. And so there's the mirror-like wisdom, equanimity, discriminating wisdom, all-accomplishing wisdom, and Dharmadhatu wisdom. And we'll look at those in just a minute because they come up again. And then the 5 male and female Buddhas. So the male Buddhas, Vairochana, usually located in the center, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, and Amoghasiddhi. Around the east, which is at the bottom when they're located physically this way, and then going around the circle as in the different 4 directions. And then the females, the consorts, are White Tara, Lochana, Mamaki, Bandara, and Green Tara. Sometimes they have different names than those, so you may see those as well. The next set of 5 are the 5 not to be rejected. So the first are the 5 poisons. Why? We're transforming the 5 poisons, of course. So delusion, desire, anger, pride, and greed are the 5 poisons. And we transform those into pure things. Within that we have, because they are helpers on the path, and so the 5 poisons become the 5 wisdoms. And so I mentioned we had some overlap here. So Dharma Dhatu is the sphere or space of absolute reality. And then the mirror-like wisdom is clear reflection of samsara and nirvana, like a mirror, clear reflection of their true nature. And then the equanimity is samsara and nirvana being equal, one taste, neither good nor bad. And then discriminating wisdom is the view, the pure view of all are equal in their essence, their nature. And finally, all-accomplishing wisdom is the various ways to benefit beings without exertion. So they just appear and provide benefits. So the Buddhas don't have to do anything to benefit beings. They just automatically, spontaneously do that. When these are embraced by skillful means, so these 5 things, the 5 poisons and the 5 wisdoms, have to be embraced by skillful means. In other words, we have to just apply them. If we're looking at them in the context of just emptiness, can't really say anything about them, can't do anything about them, and we're not Buddhas, in which case we spontaneously do something without, or just make things happen without actually doing anything. So we do them in the sense of the way that they're described here, understand them in a more literal way. So here one can see that there is a way to take things that are normally perceived as bad and turn them around into the very features that may become beneficial for your practice and your understanding. So these are examples of how Buddhism reinterpreted some of the original tantric practices, going from poisons into wisdoms. Okay, we're running out of time here. So it looks like we may have to spend a couple of weeks going through these. So we will come back to these again next week and continue talking about the tantric practices in terms of ethics and the view of the ethics. So let's go ahead and wrap up then by going to our closing prayers on page 3 of the handout you have. Om Ahum Shri 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 Om Ahum Shri. Long life prayers. First for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. For this realm, encircled by snow-covered mountains, you are the source of every benefit and bliss without exception. Tenzin Gyatso, you who are one with Avalokiteshvara, may you remain steadfast until samsara's end. In His Holiness Khenpo Lama Rinpoche, in the Dharma Dhatu, appearing as Amitabha, in the Sambhogakaya form as Wisdom Buddha Manjushri, Padmasambhava's heart son Sangye Yeshe, incarnated as Padmadana Lingpa in previous life, and Palje Padorje in this lifetime. May your life be longer than the duration of samsara, so that all your virtuous intentions can be accomplished. Please give me your heart blessings so that my mind is united with yours in the Buddha nature. So I pray. And Yogi Khenpo Drimed Dawa, Emaho, you understand the knowable objects of samsara, great teacher. You have realized the intent of the sacred Dharma, Yogi Khenpo. Your Dharma practice is unification of the two. Drimed Dawa, stainless moon, you live on. You wish for bodhicitta. Om Ahum Shri Ananta Benza Sarva Siddhi Palahum Ah. Glorious, precious root Lama, on the lotus seat on the crown of my head, with your great kindness, please accept me. Please bestow the realizations of body, speech, and mind in all the activities of the glorious Lama. May no wrong view arise even for a moment. By the devotion of seeing whatever he or she does as perfect, may the blessing of the Lama enter my mind. Throughout the succession of my lives, from the perfect Lamas, may I never be separated, and enjoying the glory of the Dharma, perfect all the qualities of the stages and the paths, and swiftly attain the stage of Vajradhara. The Lamas who have become the glory of the Dharma, may their lives be stable. May the land entirely filled with doctrine holders, may the wealth and power of the patrons of the doctrine increase, and may the auspiciousness of the doctrine remain forever. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I dedicate the merit of this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. I dedicate the merit of this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. I dedicate the merit of this practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. So thank you all very much for showing up today, and those of you who are online, either live or watching the recording of this. And our Wednesday practice this week is Amitabha, so join us for that, like 6 p.m., also available on Facebook Live. And then we will be back again with our Sunday practice next week at 11 o'clock, and we'll continue our talk on the ethics in terms of Tantra. And so please abide softly and deeply in pure awareness for all sentient beings with loving kindness and compassion for all, always and always. Thank you, and please be safe.